Everyone says you should eat healthy, but what happens when healthy foods become dangerous or even deadly? I filmed these fruits and vegetables with a 400mm lens, because if I get too close, I could be risking my life. I have oral allergy syndrome, also known as pollen food syndrome, which basically means that pollen from trees and grasses cross-reacts with raw fruits and vegetables, causing allergic reactions. You've probably noticed I keep putting an emphasis on raw fruits and vegetables, and that's because the protein that makes me react is sensitive to heat.
Now, the allergen is very heat labile or very fragile. So many people will claim that they have symptoms when they eat raw apples, but when they eat apple pie, they don't have symptoms because the allergen is heated.
So that means I can eat most fruits and vegetables cooked, like really cooked. But of course, heat kills a lot of nutrients too, so healthy eating is still pretty much off the table. It's very rare for this allergy to become severe.
They can experience symptoms of itchiness in the mouth and hives, mainly limited to the face, when they eat these fruits and vegetables. However, 2% of patients can have symptoms that progress, especially if they continue and eat the food, although they are feeling the itchiness.
Yeah, that might have been me. Growing up, I loved fruits and vegetables and thought itchiness after eating them was totally normal. So I continued eating carrots, cherries, and my personal favorite, watermelon. But the itchiness worsened to swelling of my lips and throat, and I developed new allergies on an almost daily basis, spending most of my childhood with an itchy, swollen throat and hives. In the past few years, the list has gotten even shorter. My allergies have now gotten to the point that eating, touching, or even being near raw and certain cooked fruits and vegetables can be life-threatening. This means restaurants, cafeterias, grocery stores, and even classrooms can be very dangerous locations for me. Wait a minute, let's back up. At this point, you're probably thinking this all sounds a little far-fetched. And trust me, I've gotten my fair share of skepticism. As a kid, most people were convinced that I was just finding really creative ways to not eat my vegetables. Growing up, my peers questioned my allergies because I admitted to never having seen an allergist or gotten one of those skin tests. So, at 16 years old, after around 9 years of reacting to foods on a semi-regular basis, I finally stepped into an allergist office full of expectation for the wisdom I would receive. Instead, he confirmed that I had severe OAS, told me a skin test would be completely unnecessary, and offered the helpful phrase, "I don't care that you have allergies." Whether or not people care, it's become very apparent that awareness of OAS is very low.
So I think awareness is not very high. And it's important to be aware because in countries like Canada, we have higher levels of that just because of the birch protein.
OAS is actually relatively common in Canada because of the high rate of pollen allergies and our many birch trees. Nonetheless, most people are still pretty much unaware that OAS actually exists.
Well, here in Canada, the most common food allergens are peanut, tree nuts, sesame, milk, egg, fish, crustaceans and mollusks, soy, wheat, and triticale, and mustard. So I've named the most common food allergens. And these are most associated with allergic reactions, but you can have a serious allergy to other foods. And I think that this is not always well understood, and it shows that more education on food allergy and various types of food allergy, like OAS, is needed overall.
When I tell people about my allergies, most people look at me like I have 3 heads. And if I hear one more person ask me, "What do you eat?" I might implode. This low level of awareness can make activities like eating in restaurants very dangerous for me.
People who serve you with food will not always be aware.
Just a few weeks before starting this video, I was at a hotel at a buffet breakfast. The breakfast potatoes, usually a safe staple for me, were covered in bell peppers. I asked my waiter if he could make a new batch without the vegetables and explained my allergies to him in depth. He said that a new batch would take too long, but was happy to offer me a bowl of fresh fruit instead. At another breakfast restaurant, after repeating my allergies multiple times to the confused waiter, he brought out my pancake with a nice big chunk of cantaloupe on top. Suffice to say, I don't go to a lot of restaurants.
So, food allergy requires ongoing management to avoid what you're allergic to in order to reduce the risk of anaphylaxis, which is a potentially life-threatening allergic reaction. So that means there are daily decisions about what foods can be eaten and different measures followed for staying safe.
It may seem pretty easy to avoid accidentally ingesting fruits and vegetables, but you'd be surprised how many places they can actually sneak in. Carrots are my worst allergy, and even if they're cooked to death, they can still pose a life-threatening risk to me. And you may be surprised how many products use black carrot juice for coloring, or how many places carrot can sneak into different foods. While my allergies may seem out of the ordinary and frankly pretty weird, I'm not alone in experiencing skepticism and confusion when telling people about my allergies.
I'm allergic to gluten, dairy, and egg whites.
I'm allergic to all nuts.
I have celiac disease, so I'm allergic to gluten.
It's kind of, I would say it affects like social interactions.
Or like when you're at a friend's place and they're making food for you, right? You always have to add in that little tidbit like, by the way, I'm allergic to nuts.
At restaurants, people are really rude about it. Because with gluten, I'm not celiac, but I have an intolerance. So it's not as significant, like cross-contamination doesn't affect me, but if I were to consume gluten, it wouldn't be good. And like at restaurants, I've had people ask me, since I'm not celiac, they say, oh, it's just a preference. I'm like, no, it's not just a preference.
That's just something I noticed at the dining halls last year, that like people weren't very careful or like educated about it, I guess.
And it's really difficult to sort of ensure that like the food that you're getting from a place that maybe you're going to for the first time, you're not sure what that food contains. It could contain nuts, and it's kind of difficult when you're out with friends and stuff to sort of ask them like, hey, does this contain nuts? And sometimes they don't know. Sometimes
people just kind of think it's like a trendy thing, because like that is kind of its reputation, especially with gluten. Like, so some people I just think it's like a choice, but obviously if I could eat like bread and donuts and stuff, I would.
It's definitely a conscious thing. It's always in my mind.
I do get very sick if I even eat like a tiny bit of gluten, so it's something I've had to be very careful about since I was like 4, so I'm really used to it now.
My dad got really sad about it because he loved like making brunch for us, and eggs are like a huge part of that, so he made me like scrambled yolks, which is just like not ideal.
If you go to a restaurant or something, they'll always ask sometimes if you have like a peanut allergy or a nut allergy, whereas for someone who's celiac, they might not always be the person to ask like, hey, this has gluten, by the way, would that be okay?
There's some people that like really have no idea like what gluten is.
So I feel like my allergy is sort of on the better spectrum of allergies, especially in North America. I guess one instance where it might not be taken as seriously is, I mean, if I were to ever go back home to India, I know my parents always tell me that, I mean, I've never been, but I know my parents always tell me that back in India, like, peanut allergies, like nut allergies and all that are like completely unheard of, right? I've heard they've been getting better at that, but I don't think they have the awareness that we have here.
Like I can't drink beer, not that that's a huge thing, but that's like a huge part of like socializing. And yeah, like I said, I can't eat out a lot, and so a lot of people do that.
My friends who were like very nice and cooked me some gluten-free macaroni one time when I went over to their house. Like they also added gluten flour to it, like not realizing that it wasn't just the pasta that would affect me. So obviously I wasn't like upset or anything, and like I didn't end up getting too sick, but that is just another thing, I guess, like just flour and like the less like visible ingredients a lot of times can have gluten. So
a lot of people don't have to worry about that, think about that, and it's definitely like always something that's in my mind, and like I'm sure other people's with allergies. So.
For Thanksgiving, I was at a friend's place. I was just hanging out with them for a bit, and they were like preparing food for Thanksgiving. One of their friends is vegan, so they had like some vegan cream cheese and all that, and then they had some crackers, and I was like, well, I'm just about to head to another friend's Thanksgiving right now, but maybe I'll stay for like a snack or a bit, because they were inviting me to like take a bite. So I was like, all right, so I took a little like cracker, and then I dipped it in some of the cream cheese, which I didn't even know was vegan. I take like a small little piece of it, I like bite off a little, I'm like, wow, this is interesting, kind of tingly, I've never had that before, what kind of cream cheese is this? I look at the ingredients like really, really quickly, it says cashews, and I'm like very allergic to cashews. So that was a whole ordeal. I had to Uber back home, grab my EpiPen just in case. Luckily I didn't need to use it, I just like waited it out, it went away for a bit, and then I went over to my friend's house for Thanksgiving.
I think people should respect people's allergies and not question them, because it's a personal thing, like it's not a social thing.
Allergies, though not always obvious, can affect people's everyday lives and should be treated with the seriousness and respect they deserve.